generally what I want to frame, what I'd like to sort of address, is that there's a more American art ideal existed before the overlay of an alien modernism and avant-gardism. Prior to the late 19th century, American art was driven by a natural American empiricism combined with a big dose of classical idealism coming out of the founders' generation. Up through the 1860s, a sequence of American artists and movements flowed out of this balance. The cataclysm of the Civil War shook the confidence of America's culture makers, leaving behind a sense that after what we did to ourselves, we weren't trustworthy. This allowed in the bacillus of European modernism. There was some degree of balance for the next 50 years between a cynical European vanguardism and a more optimistic old school American art. And in this balanced time, imagine like you have at the same time Georgia O'Keeffe and Daniel Chester French, who were both working in the 1920s. I have pictures of them later. And that's the last time there was much of what I consider a more Native American art, because subsequently European avant-gardism swept all before it aside. I have to go back to the beginning again, sorry. Okay, so here's Emanuel Leutz's great masterpiece from 1851. I'm sorry, I did look at the TVs, and they're not great. I apologize for the way the images look. They look better up here. But I can't have you all up here. So this is this lovely cycle, and I think it's kind of apropos for talking about American art and also where we are, because it's this series of paintings by Thomas Cole called The Course of Empire. And as we go through them, we'll see, I'm sorry to do this, but here you see there's a little geological feature in the background, and this is a sort of a savage scene where people aren't quite yet civilized. This is Arcadia. These paintings are pretty big. They're in New York. They're very carefully wrought, and he's representing the growth of civilization. As an American idealist, he was painting these paintings, like probably, I would guess, in the 1840s. Here, this is the sort of fulfillment of empire. Of course, it's Rome, or it's his picture of Rome with that little piece of geology in the background, which is nice. He keeps running that through. He's then, of course, this is the cataclysm, this is the crisis, which maybe we recognize a little bit in our own time. This is the beautiful ruins of what was once a great empire. And he may be sort of, as a great lover of America, coming out of that generation when there still was so much optimism, was representing both his hopes and his fears. This is just to give a picture of American. This is from the 1770s. This is Copley's painting masterpiece. Here's a mid-19th century American master, Hiram Powers. He spent a lot of his career in Rome. You see that there was a tremendous, I'm not sure I feel like I see it, that it is American. Of course, it's extremely classical, and he's coming out of a period of great enthusiasm throughout Europe. This is Charles Wilson Peale, self-portrait, one of the great founders of the Philadelphia School of Painting. His children also were very important artists. And this has that sort of, the quality in that of taking a really hard look. I guess that's what I mean by American empiricism. This is a painting in the middle of the century. It's Harnett. Again, that sort of passion for examining at the same balanced with this harmonizing and building compositions and making art that's beautiful and flowing. This is Decker. He's not a very widely known artist. This painting is in Washington right here. To me, it has that same quality, extremely, it doesn't really, I don't know, maybe a European might have painted it or something like it, but it also has a feeling of this is the same guy, Decker, just really looking at the world and showing it to us how he sees it. And there's something to me just tremendously successful and beautiful about the way they're made, the handling of the paint and the composition of them. Here's a Sanford Gifford. It's a painting of his friend painting in Maine. And this is in some ways one of the high points of this growth of what I consider an American art spirit is the Hudson River painters who were very passionate naturalists, and it was their vision of this is Frederick Church painting of the Parthenon. So it's a classicism, but then the next one, it's another church, extremely American. Of course, this one's right down the block here in D.C., and I think that's a spectacular composition, but also just so full of observation and the desire to show the world, to give us the world as he finds it. Here's Albert Bierstadt. I think that one might be in town also. That's magnificent, a little more fantastical, sort of full of kind of a fantastic idealism. But his paintings can, for some people, be over the top, but they're just so beautiful also. Here's Thomas Kensett. This is Frederick Kensett. This is in New York, at Lake George, I think. It's in the Metropolitan Museum. It's, again, this like in the foreground, if you can see that sort of desire, and that's a very Hudson River school, the desire to really, and this is a Sanford Gifford again. If I'm attributing them wrong, you please raise your arm and tell me. The sort of pursuit of a sublime beauty and an idealism. This is Ines, and this is probably a painting of the pines in Rome. Now he's a kind of a later painter. You see it's starting to look a little bit more modern, but in my kind of way of thinking, this is a later Ines. You can see it's getting influenced by some of the developments in European art and Barbizon painting, perhaps even Impressionism. I just find it so beautiful. I feel like this, that's Winslow Homer, these are artists who are really straddling this period of the Civil War. Homer was a Civil War painter. He did a lot of paintings that he did in a grayscale that were then reproduced in the newspapers of the war. This is Thomas Eakins. This is a great example of an artist making a very classical painting that's both full of classical reference in its construction, but also this very empirical quality. This is St. Gaudens, Diana. Again, it's very, he maybe feels a little more European in some ways to me, but he was, as we all know, one of the great, and here's our great Daniel Chester French, who was, I think it's possible he lived all the way up until around 1930, which is kind of amazing to think that this sort of narrative of the end of that tradition. This is William Merritt Chase, who is a transitional figure, and the transition I'm interested in here is the moving from what I'm calling this more natural American art spirit, which is this combination of optimistic idealism and classicism and sort of a hard empiricism, examining the world very thought. Here's another Chase. So Chase is coming back after the war, and he was a very important figure. He comes back with the spirit of what I'm calling, this is a Bellows, a generation younger, probably early 1900s. You can see this sort of social progressive social spirit in this, of painting the poor in their tenement neighborhood. Here's George O'Keeffe, who's painted this. Maybe, this is really abstract, and here's what I'm trying to stress is that the avant-garde that the Americans went and found especially in Paris. Gosh, I think that's maybe Marston Hartley. God, I'm sorry if but again, 1914 or something like that. These are the artists that were that featured and also drove the Armory show. For those of you who were, this period. For those of you who sort of studied art history, the Armory show is the sort of triumph, or the beginning of the triumph of the avant-garde culture as the primary institutional art of America, which is sort of what I'm pitching against, that I feel like that was an error, and it's not really very American to me. And it's something that it sort of came in for me. Here's some examples of kind of counter moments, which, Grant Wood is a magnificent painting. Grant Wood is sort of very famous in a folky way, but I don't think his influence has been particularly sort of strongly followed. He's a sort of interesting little side note. And of course, Hopper sort of is a little exception. He gets a little carve out for some reason, which I don't know what it is, but he's super. And there's other people that I would include in a sort of a list of, is it gonna stop, or will it do it again? In a list of artists that I would sort of feel like I wish we were more in line with. But that's been my path. The other point I want to make about sort of the avant-garde that the Americans found in France, this sort of revolutionary spirit, which comes out of, the avant-gardists as artists in France in particular understood themselves to be sort of side by side with the political avant-garde. They were pushing very hard, and they understood their job to be they were adjacent. Their job was to help to dismantle the societal and social structures that they felt were the cause or the source of iniquity. And to some degree, that's admirable. And I think there's a lot of things I think were pretty mixed up and confused in that period. But it's hard for me to really hold it against 19th century avant-gardists who thought they were going to use their art to make the world fairer. And even the form, the way they painted, for the most part, they still seemed, their experimental energy and their desire to sort of dismantle their forms, they still stayed within their forms, and they just often did them in a sort of an exciting way as practitioners who maintained a reverence for the forms, for their own forms. There's a second avant-garde, which is the one that kicks in around 1900. That's, I think, it's possible the first one inevitably led to the second one, but this second one is the one that we have now. And it's when people complain so much, and it's like, you go to these enormous billion-dollar institutions and everything is inscrutable. It's a pile of rocks. It's something very vulgar. It's something that's just sort of very, intentionally ugly, all of that. I think that really does go back to this thing that we got. We replaced it came in that period of 1900, and as the Armory show, to the next, whatever, it was about 30 years of hard work, what I would consider sort of an astroturfing of the American culture, maybe the first really successful shot at it, that ended up with the international avant-garde, what I call the institutional avant-garde, that has left us, I think it's left us sort of stripped in terms of having a visual culture. And I think listen, I don't want to run down other artists. I'm not interested in that other artists are illegitimate or bad. I'm more interested in the structure of patronism that's driven this and continues to drive it. So if I could come away and think that if there's any redemption, anything we could do, it's to get back to find our way forward by getting back to where we were in that period, probably, in the period of the Civil War, before I think we started to pull in a whole lot of this sort of complicated and destructive, and I think was, Colin, you were talking about the need to negate, that's really the driving energy. It's the negation, and I think it makes it very hard to make a beautiful thing if you're been poisoned by this spirit of negation. So, thank you very much.